The man in the red suit sits beside you on the bus. Don't acknowledge him, no matter how familiar his face seems. I had taken the late bus home more times than I could count, but that night, something felt different. The air in the vehicle was heavier, stale, like the smell of clothes that have been locked in a trunk for decades. Only 4 of us sat scattered along the dimly lit aisle, shadows swaying as the street lamps outside flickered past. At the next stop, the bus door opened with a slow, reluctant hiss, and he stepped in. The man in the red suit. It wasn't the kind of red you'd see in a cheap Christmas outfit, it was deep, faded, and wrinkled in places like dried blood. He walked with stiff, deliberate movements, scanning the passengers as though checking a list only he could see. Then he sat down beside me. My first thought was that I knew him. I couldn't place from where, maybe an old teacher, maybe someone I'd passed in a store, but his face clung to my memory like a splinter you can't remove. His skin was pale, not the pale of someone tired, but of someone who'd been drained. His smile was wrong, too wide, stretching just past what felt human. Every nerve in me screamed to move, but something in his gaze pinned me in place. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see his hands folded neatly on his lap, the fingernails too long and yellowed. His voice, when it came, was slow and soft, like a lullaby that didn't want you to wake up. "It's been a while," he said, though I had no memory of ever meeting him. I remembered something then, an old rumor, passed around in hushed tones by people who'd lost friends or family on their way home. They said if you ever found yourself sitting next to a man in a faded red suit on the bus, you had to pretend you couldn't see him. If you acknowledged him, he'd follow you home. And once he knew where you lived, you'd vanish within 3 days. Some swore they'd seen him in photographs taken decades apart, never looking a day older. Others whispered that he didn't take you somewhere else, he simply kept you, like a pressed flower in a book, forever stuck between moments. The bus kept moving, the hum of the engine muffled under the weight of his presence. I kept my eyes fixed on the scratched plastic seat in front of me, but I could feel him leaning closer, watching for the slightest reaction. The smell of damp earth and something metallic seeped from his clothes. My mind itched to ask him who he was, why he looked so familiar, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. I had to remember the rules. Don't look. Don't speak. Don't move until he's gone. When the bus stopped again, he stood without a sound. He didn't walk toward the front exit, he slipped out the back door, gliding down into the dark. For a moment, I swore I could see his reflection in the window beside me, still seated, still smiling. Then the bus pulled away, and the seat was empty. I didn't sleep that night. Because the next morning, when I left my apartment, there was a single red thread tied to my doorknob. Rules to survive the man in the red suit. 1. If he sits beside you, do not acknowledge him. Not even a glance. 2. Do not respond if he speaks, he will know you've seen him. 3. Stay seated until he leaves the bus, moving before he's gone is an invitation. 4. If you find a red thread at your home, it's already too late. The first time I saw the thread, it was lying across my kitchen floor like a trail of blood, thin and delicate, leading from the doorway toward my bedroom. My first thought was that it had come from an old sweater or a misplaced spool of yarn, except I don't own anything red. I bent to pick it up, but as my fingers brushed against it, the strand seemed to tighten, pulling ever so slightly toward the darkened hall. The air felt colder there, heavy and stale, as if it hadn't been touched by sunlight in years. I told myself I was imagining it, but when I tried to follow the thread, it disappeared under my bedroom door, the gap beneath it too narrow for even a slip of paper. That night, I dreamed of someone sitting at the foot of my bed, their face hidden in shadow but their hands busy with something unseen. When I woke up, the room was empty, but the red thread was looped around my wrist, tied in a perfect knot. I tore it off and threw it into the trash. It was gone by morning. Not gone as in still in the bin, but gone as if it had never existed, leaving no trace. The knot still burned against my skin, a faint mark like a rope burn, and I swear I could smell something faintly metallic, almost like crust, clinging to the air. Days passed, and the thread returned. Sometimes I'd find it curled on my pillow, sometimes draped across my bathroom sink, always placed with deliberate care, as if someone wanted me to see it. Once, I came home to find it coiled in the shape of a handprint on my dining table. That night, I heard footsteps pacing outside my bedroom door, slow and measured, followed by the soft whisper of something being dragged across the floor. When I finally dared to look, there was nothing there, except for the thread, stretched taut from the hallway into the dark space under my bed. I tried staying at a friend's place, but the thread followed me. It appeared on the floor beside my borrowed bed, and when I picked it up, I found it warm, as if it had just been resting against human skin. My friends swore no one had entered the room. The next morning, I caught sight of someone in the corner of my eye, a tall, thin figure draped in red cloth, watching from the other side of the street. By the time I turned fully, they were gone. I don't know when the scratching started. It came from the walls at first, faint and rhythmic, like fingernails tapping along the plaster. Then it moved to the ceiling, directly above where I slept, each drag of the sound growing sharper, more insistent. I called my landlord, he found nothing. But that night, when the scratching reached my pillow, I woke to find the red thread wrapped around my neck, pulled tight. No one was in the room. No one living, anyway. 2 nights ago, I followed it. I don't remember making the decision, my body just moved, my hands clutching the thread like a lifeline as it led me down the hall, into the basement, and toward the farthest corner where the light bulb flickered. There, in the shadows, the figure waited. Their face was wrong. Too much like mine, but stretched, as if it had been stitched together from memory rather than flesh. They held a needle, long and gleaming, and without speaking, they pressed the thread into my hand. I woke up in my bed, the spool resting on my chest, the first layer of stitching already biting into my skin. Now, the thread never leaves me. It winds around my wrists, my ankles, my throat in the night. Sometimes I wake up and feel it tug, just slightly, from somewhere beyond the dark. And I know, with a kind of heavy certainty, that one night it will pull hard enough to take me where it wants. If you find a red thread at your home, it's already too late. The thread will never be where you expect it. It will wind along the floorboards, slipping under doors, curling around chair legs, trailing into places you were certain you checked before. You might tell yourself it's nothing, just lint from clothing, yarn from an old sweater, something your shoes dragged in from outside. But the truth becomes harder to ignore the longer you follow it. You'll notice how unnervingly perfect the thread is, vibrant scarlet, not frayed, not dusty, not a single knot. It never tangles. And when you bend down to touch it, you'll feel a faint warmth, like it's been lying in sunlight, even if your house has been dark all day. It will lead you somewhere. It always leads somewhere. Maybe it's down the hallway, past rooms you know, or maybe it takes you toward the basement door you keep locked, even though you can't remember ever putting a lock there. Maybe it leads into your bedroom, curling under the bed like something waiting for you to kneel and look. The air around it will feel heavier, pressing against your skin. Sometimes you'll hear it, yes, hear the thread. A faint sound, like whispering through clenched teeth, traveling through the fibers. You'll lean closer, against your better judgment, and you might swear you hear your name being spoken. The thread doesn't stop when you sleep. In fact, when you wake, it will be somewhere new. Wrapped around the base of your nightstand. Across your pillow. Once, I woke to find it looped twice around my wrist, tied in a knot so tight my skin blistered. I didn't tie it. I know I didn't. And yet, it felt like something had been measuring me while I slept. It doesn't matter if you cut it. I've tried. The scissors jammed on it like the blades hit steel. Knives slid across it without a scratch. I once burned it over the stove, and the smoke that rose didn't smell like fabric, it smelled like hair. Someone's hair. The thread doesn't get shorter when you try to destroy it. If anything, it seems to grow faster, slipping under doors and into corners you swore were empty moments before. One night, I followed it. I don't know why, I guess I thought if I saw where it ended, maybe I could undo whatever was happening. It led me outside. Across my lawn. Into the woods behind my house, where the ground was slick with rot and the trees were black silhouettes against the moon. I kept thinking the end must be close. But the thread never ended. It just descended. Down into a shallow hole I didn't remember being there, wide enough for a person. The smell hit me first, wet soil, rust, and something sweet that clung to my throat. I crouched and peered in. I wish I could forget what I saw. The thread didn't just disappear into the dirt, it went into a hand. A pale, thin hand, stretched upward, its fingers curled around the thread like a puppet master's grip. And that hand was attached to something buried deep, its arm impossibly long, disappearing into shadows I couldn't see the bottom of. The fingers twitched when I looked at them, and the thread jerked toward me. That's when I realized something else, the thread wasn't leading me anywhere. It was pulling me closer. I ran. I didn't look back. I tripped twice in the woods, ripping my palms open on stones, but I didn't stop until I was inside, slamming the door and locking it. I thought I was safe. Then I noticed the thread again, looped around the handle of the door I just locked, as if someone had tied it there from the inside. The next morning, I woke to find the thread wound tightly around my ankles. Not enough to cut the skin. Just enough to make sure I knew it had been there all night. It's been 3 days since then. I've stopped following it. I've stopped trying to destroy it. Now I just watch it. But every night, it's closer. I can see the end now, coiled neatly, just under my bed frame. And last night, as I lay still in the dark, I felt something cold wrap around my wrist and give the slightest, most deliberate tug.